Yeah,
Hello. Hi,
yeah,
sir.
okay. Yeah, hi, how are you?
I'm good. And you?
Yeah, I'm fine. I'm good. Yeah, I'm good. Yeah. Happy to join you.
Okay, thank you very much. So I think the students are
Mhm.
online. I have to start my
Yeah,
live.
that's it. Yeah. That's it. Yeah.
Good afternoon, dear students. How are you?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, hi, how are you?
I'm good. And you?
Yeah, I'm fine. I'm good. Yeah, I'm good. Yeah. Happy to join you.
Dear students, how are you doing? Great. Good to see you all. This is Dr. Ja. My first name is Alassane Abdoulaye. So I'm Alassane Abdoulaye Ja, your professor of Introduction to Literature and your professor of American Civilization. I'm also the chair of the Department of English and the Bachelor Program Manager. I would like at the very beginning to say welcome to all of you and to wish you a successful and academic year. I hope everything is going well. So today is my first lecture in Introduction to Literature. First, I will start with an exploration of the course description to let you know what are the objectives of this course and what is the orientation of this course, what it helps you understand, and what is expected from you in order to understand and build, foundational skills to be able, to lead successfully your journey in the English department. So feel free to ask questions. This is a kind of lecture directly broadcast on the YouTube channel. So I'm in the Zoom room. So I am following at the same time the YouTube channel. If you have questions, you have post them there. I will take time to review them and answer your questions. Feel free if I speak so fast, if it is so quick, let me know. I will do my best to go slowly and to help you understand everything and every detail. Every 10 minutes, I will pause a bit to take your questions and answer them. So let me quickly share my screen, all right? And take the course description first. So in terms of course description, this is what we have, all right? So course description. This course entitled Introduction to Literature is designed for you as first year students of English to provide you with foundational understanding of literature. And here to let you understand, and have a good understanding of the foundation of literature means to help you understand the forms of literature and the functions of literature and historical evolution of literature. Because you understand, you were familiar already with literature. You started, even if not very officially, in the English department. Previously, in secondary school, you learned French literature or African Francophone literature. But just to let you know that literature, as one of the most enduring aspects of human civilization, serves as a means of artistic expression because it related to arts. So you see, the writer is an artist and he is using literature as a means of expression. So they use literature to voice their mind. They use literature to engage with the community. They use literature to talk to the people, to talk to the world. They use literature to contribute. So it is also a means of cultural preservation. Why is it a means of cultural preservation? Because literature is an integral part. It is part and parcel of culture. It is found in the scope of culture. It is also a means of intellectual inquiry. It means simply intellectual investigation. You use literature curiously to investigate, to read, to discover, to learn, to know, and to act, and to react, to communicate with the text, and to communicate with the artist. There is more direct interaction with the text and less direct interaction with the artist, because here, if the artist is a writer, and the piece of literature is a work of art. You can find a kind of interaction between both of them. We use literature for several purposes. This course will equip you as students of the first year with analytical tools necessary to engage with literary texts. So it is an initiation, do not worry. It is an introductory course. That is the reason why it is called Introduction to Literature. In other terms, if I simplify it, this course introduces you to literature. So it gives you analytical tools. These are tools, techniques, competencies, skills that you necessarily need to know in order for you to interpret literary texts, in order for you to easily navigate in literature, understand what is literature. Anytime you have a piece of literature, you will be relaxed, you will be very comfortable with them. It helps you interpret the themes. When you open a book, it could be a novel, a play, a piece of poetry, you find themes, means topics. You can interpret them. How would you interpret them? This course will give you the necessary elements you need to be able to grasp literature, to be able to appreciate literature. When we talk about appreciation, it is interpretation, understanding, reception, how you understand, how you grasp things. And this will help you do it in a broader role of literature in society. When you do that, I am satisfied with you. I am the one who designed this course. That's all that I want you to understand in this course, Introduction to Literature. Understand the foundational elements, the fundamentals of literature in society. If you do it, it's fine. That's why I have simplified it in 3 major chapters that help you easily familiarize with literature. In terms of objectives, number 1, my first objective is to let you understand and familiarize with the definition of literature. There are so many definitions, but try to understand from a general point of view what is the orientation of literature, what is meant by literature, and try to understand its significance in human history and culture. Why literature? What is literature for? How literature functions and how it is used. Second objective, identify and analyze different literary genres. This is important. From second, you were introduced to the literary genre. These genres include poetry. Poetry as a literary genre. You will learn what is poetry. Compared to fiction. In any case, people consider that literature is broadly fiction, but there are some categories and subcategories. One major genre is poetry, one of the oldest. And fiction, usually when people talk about fiction, people mean by fiction the novel. In French, le roman. You have read L'Aventure Ambiguë, Ambiguous Adventure by Cheikh Hamidou Kane. You have read So Long a Letter by Mariama Ba. You have read La Collésienne. You have read so many other books. But understand that saying book in English or book in literature, this is a very elementary term. It's too vague. When you say a book, what is it? We talk about genre. You have to say if it is a novel, if it is theater, a piece of poetry, rather than saying the book, the book. Avoid saying that. The book says that. No. We say the poem says that, or the poem shows that, or the novel says that, or the short story, or the drama. And we talk about drama. Drama is related to theater. We will see what is the difference. Drama also is based on fiction. But here, why is it this fiction also combined with performance? It is supposed to be performed. It is supposed to be both acted, written, and acted. And last, non-fiction. What is non-fiction? Non-fiction means you are close to reality. When a writer decides to write about his memoir or autobiography, probably you have read the autobiography of Benjamin Franklin, or you have read Barack Obama's Dreams from My Father, or maybe you have read Michelle Obama's Becoming. These are non-fiction works. When you write your autobiography or your memoir, you are not in the domain of fiction. You are telling people your background, everything related to that. That's what we refer to in non-fiction. It could also include as a genre, like the essay. You have read Discours sur le colonialisme of Aimé Césaire. That's an essay. You have read the Manifesto of the Communist Party by Frederick Engels and Karl Marx, Le Manifeste du Parti Communiste. These are philosophical essays. They are part of non-fiction. And then we continue, we will explore the aesthetic, intellectual, moral, social, psychological functions of literature. In this objective, what I want to look for is to let you understand what are the objectives in terms of functions of literature. What literature wants, looking for aesthetic purposes, intellectual purposes, moral, social, psychological functions of literature. And next objective is examine the historical evolution of literature from oral traditions to contemporary digital forms. And here, briefly, I want you, when you are asked the question, I ask you these questions during the exam. Tell me about the brief evolution of literature. You should have a small sketch of literature in your mind, starting from oral tradition to contemporary digital forms. I have not, given an exhaustive development of literature because you are beginners. That will be too much technical. Here, this is an initiation. This is an introduction. I want you just to understand briefly what is the evolution of literature. And here we will see that it is started from oral traditions. Because if you take some societies like Africa or ancient Greek, they were deeply rooted in the oral tradition. Before the coming of literacy, cultures existed, but they were orally transmitted. We have myths, legends in African culture. But before literacy came, it means writing, all this existed. It was finally materialized. And now we talk about contemporary digital forms. Now we are in a new era of civilization. We call it the digital revolution. We talk about digital culture. Now it is part of our existence. It is part of our human experience. The world is digitalized. Even our cultures are digitalized. Literature is digitalized. We will see how technology has played a role. There is a transformative, function of literature. We talk about digital forms. Now storytellers are coming back. There is a revival of oral literature. In the past, you used to hear the bar or the poet talking or singing. Now you can have the chance to go and watch a cultural night through YouTube. Maybe a storyteller from Nigeria, or a Yoruba storyteller, or a Jola storyteller, or a Pulari storyteller is inviting you through his TikTok telling stories. He is an artist. That is literature, but it is in the box of digital literature. And last, develop critical reading and interpretive skills necessary for literary analysis. This means that when later on in your journey, you are invited now to comment on a text, you know what to use, you know the tools, you know the road. It's just like when I say, tomorrow come to my house. It means first I showed you where my house is, you know the road. If tomorrow I invite you to comment on a poem or interpret it, I have no doubt it's because I have given you the tools, the ways, the means, the techniques, and the skills to develop that. And I'm confident that you will love this text, this course, because I have already a very positive feedback coming from tutors saying that you are doing a good job. And I congratulate you. I encourage you to continue. Work with your tutors. When they come on the platform, I have already posted the course materials with videos, but you will benefit with lectures like this. Every chapter, I will be online lecturing, helping you understand everything, because this helps you understand easily the course materials. And you will know that it's not a memorization. No, it's not a memorization. It is an understanding of the content. Understand rather than memorize. And my specific objective is in chapter 1. That's what we're dealing with today. Chapter 1 is about introduction and functions of literature. The specific objective, what I want you to understand in chapter 1 is define literature. What are the various definitions of literature? There is no fixed definition. There is no fixed definition. All right? But there are a number. Any of them, even if you reformulate it, it is fine. Show me that you understand the orientation of literature, the perception of literature, how it is perceived by the people, by artists, by communities, by the audience, or even by yourself, because you are a reader. Maybe some of you are writers. Don't be afraid of giving your opinion. And next, explore its dynamic nature across time and cultures, how literature has evolved and how it has been used through time and space. And next, we will examine the core functions of literature, including its most renowned function, aesthetic enjoyment, intellectual stimulation, moral guidance, and social critique. And the other specific objective is to discuss examples of literary works that serve each function. Yes, here we will have a short discussion where you will be given examples of pieces of literature, and then you work on them and we discuss. So this is to let you know that today we focus only on chapter 1. And chapter 2 later on, maybe not this week, 2 weeks after. There you will define poetry and distinguish it from prose. Identify key characteristics of poetry, including rhythm, meter, imagery, and figurative language. That will be in chapter 2, but today we are not dealing with chapter 2. This is just a presentation of the course. And then the other specific objective is to classify different forms of poetry. When you are able to identify the characteristics of poetry, remember in terminal, you learned versification. Here it is simply that, versification, but in English. It's very easy. You will see practical examples. You will look at poetry, rhythm, meter, imagery, and figurative language. You will be able to classify different forms of poetry. When we talk about epic, I will tell you, what is an epic? Or I give you a poem, you tell me, is this an epic, a ballad, a lyric, an ode, or an elegy? or a sonnet, if you read the different characteristics of each subcategory or subgenre, you should be able, this is an epic, this is a ballad, because it's not a lyric, because it's not an elegy, because the theme is about this sadness, the theme is about melancholy, the theme is about anger, it is rhyme, this and that. These characteristics are here to help you distinguish the subcategories. And then next objective, you will be able to analyze how poetry expresses emotions. You know, poetry is the most expository genre. Writers show their feelings. You will see it, cultural identity. They define themselves. Remember, for example, expressions, emotions. Remember the Enlightenment, le siècle du mal. When people like Baudelaire talked about the flowers of evil, les fleurs du mal. When you hear Charles Baudelaire saying, tomorrow at dawn, demain de l'aube à l'heure où blanchit la campagne, you will see that Hugo is talking about his emotions. He was deeply shocked by the death of his daughter. Cultural identity, how poetry is used as an art to define people. David Job said, Afrique, mon Afrique, Afrique des fiers, des guerriers dans la savane ancestrale. Africa chante ma grand-mère. Africa, my Africa. Africa by the rivers. Here you see that this poem is giving you a cultural localization of Africa. This poem personifies Africa. This poem turns Africa like a human being. Africa not only like a geographical zone, but Africa as an existing cultural dynamics. And it shows you where Africa is, what Africa represents. It personifies Africa. And then philosophical ideas. You will see how philosophical ideas are reflected in poetry or in literature in general. And last, chapter 3 will introduce you to fiction. I told you, fiction will deal with novels, non-fiction like memoir, autobiography, essays, and last, drama. And here, you will be able to differentiate between fiction and non-fiction, outlining their key characteristics, identifying the essential elements of fiction, telling me what is a plot, it means in French, intrigue, a character, personnage, setting, theme, etc. You will be able to recognize the different forms of non-fiction. What is a biography? What are the biographical features, autobiographical features, etc. And then last, you will be able to explore drama as a genre and know the different elements of drama, dialogue, setting, performance, and each subgenre, tragedy, comedy, and everything. And these will be the chapters. So this was, about the course description. Now I move to the course as now it is chapter 1, Introduction to Literature. And in Introduction to Literature, chapter 1 is about functions of literature. Okay? It is about the functions of literature, introduction and functions of literature. So feel free to ask questions. I will be happy to answer all your questions, as I told you. And there is one of your tutors who is here, who is helping. Maybe Mr. Mane can pick some questions and post them in the chat. I am in the Zoom room. I will be happy to answer the questions. So chapter 1, Introduction and Functions of Literature. Let us start with the beginning. What is literature? In the introduction of his book entitled Studying Literature in English, an introduction published in 2014, Dominic Rainsford states that, I quote, we begin studying literature for all sorts of reasons and with all sorts of expectations. What does it mean? When we learn literature, we have different reasons, so many reasons why we learn. And the reasons are personal and specific. I may read a piece of literature for my own purpose, maybe to find consolation, to find knowledge. You can read it to find entertainment. You can read it to, boost your vocabulary or whatever. So that's why we see that with all sorts of expectations. In terms of expectations, we talk about results, outcomes. It depends on what you want. For example, Dominic Rainford says, we may look to literature for entertainment. The most general view is people look at literature for entertainment. La littérature sert à divertir. Literature is for entertainment. It's not only that. People take poetry, they read. You did a lot of recitation in primary school or chant. Why did you learn recitation et chant in elementary? Because this makes the kids learn. Oh, tomorrow is recitation et chant. Afrique, mon Afrique, Afrique des fiers de guerriers. Because here, the teacher is letting the kids interact with literature. You did not know, but you learned literature in elementary school. Recitation et chant are parts of literature. This is one part of literature, entertainment. And we may hope that a bit more knowledge about literature will increase that entertainment. Why? Because the perception of literature in elementary school is different from the perception of literature in secondary. In elementary school, people teach you recitation et chant. You just engage with the text. The kids just love it. The kids like it and they appreciate. Oh, I prefer the Médélope. Oh, I prefer Afrique, mon Afrique. Oh, I prefer La mort de David Diop. Oh, I prefer Le laboureur et ses champs. They cannot interpret. But when they continue, they go to troisième, quatrième, they start having a knowledge of literature. They know what is literature. What are the functions of literature? Here they are looking for knowledge now. They read for general knowledge, culture générale. They are looking now, they know Ramatoulaye. Why Ramatoulaye wrote the letter to Aïssatou? To expose her problems and everything. And you start. You read Le Père Goriot de Balzac, and you start that. So here you are looking for knowledge and general knowledge about that. Another option is we may have an idea that literature can somehow help make us stronger or better equipped with life. It means literature is contributing to our journey in life. That is true. Maybe you were a lazy boy and you read a strong character in a novel or in a book and you wanted to be like that strong character. You read Sunjata Keita. If you read Sunjata Keita, maybe a Manding wants simply to become a hero or a king like him. Maybe the Fulani, you read El Haj Omar, and you want to be like that, or the Jola. You read a hero and you want to be like that hero because it connects to your culture. Or in a more general view, maybe you have read a character who has acted as a gentleman, as a good leader, or a man of the situation. And you are interacting with this fictional character to build a life, to change your life. Here it is impacting. Or it can be better equipped for life, or that learning without literature is how it works, is therefore a matter of real importance. So to finish commenting on the statement of Dominic Rainford, there is a great interest, a keen interest or importance of why people learn literature. literature is not simply fiction. It's not only for fun, but we use it as a part of culture. Beyond, the function of entertainment, we use it as part of culture. Literature is one of the most enduring aspects of human civilization. And this is, among others, the many answers that you will have when you ask teachers, specialists, or artists, or readers, why people learn literature. All right? And this is one of the options that you have. So these kind of answers provided most of the time are the most common, but they are not restricted to that only. Why? Because I can share another opinion or an experience of a great writer, James Baldwin. James Baldwin is an African-American writer. If I help you understand African-American writers, is Black American writers. And James Baldwin said, I quote, "You think your pain and your heartbreak are unprecedented in the history of the world, but then you read." What he means that you have experienced something hard. Maybe let me take an elementary, you are young boys and girls. I know you are fond of love. You have had love stories with your girlfriends or your boyfriends. Okay, I use these examples, for pedagogical purposes. Maybe you were kind of dumped, you were shocked, and you read a book. Maybe you have read Romeo and Juliet. You have seen the story of Romeo and Juliet. Maybe you loved a very nice girl or a very nice boy, but your parents did not want you to marry them. Go in the domain of fiction, you find it in Romeo and Juliet. These kind of realities. Or another situation, a woman does not live a happy life in her conjugal life. This woman can go and read So Long a Letter. Wow, I was married last year, but I read So Long a Letter by Mariama Ba. Published more than 30 years now, and it tells the problem. Why? It's because the writer is part of the community. The writer is not giving solutions, medication, but the writer is giving prescription. If you are sick, you go and you see a doctor. The doctor gives you a medical prescription and a medication. You take both of them. But the writer gives only a prescription. It does not give a medication. You get me, class? You read So Long a Letter, you get released. That's what James Baldwin wanted to say. It was books that taught me that the things that tormented me most were the very things that connected me with all the people who were alive and who had ever been alive. He said that through books, you have discovered the real world and the unknown world. Through books, you see reality and fiction, they merge. So literature is part fiction, part real. Because the fiction comes from the real, and the real merged in the fiction to imagine a world that can be better, or that can look like our world. That's why there is a similarity between those people, the characters, with our real life. Let me check if I have some questions and I try to pick them. All right, now I guess everything is going well. Now, what the authors said in the previous paragraphs, all right, they imply that reading fosters, it means develops a sense of connection by showing that others, past, present, have experienced similar emotions. It means that when you read or when you explore literature, you feel kind of a connection with a world that does not exist. A fictional world, but a world that makes could be in the past, it could be in the present, it could even be in the future. We talk about dystopian fiction. And you will see that these people in this imaginary world have experienced similar emotions. That's why you see many fans of television, they read or they watch a teledrama and they cry. You see many people who read a book and they cry. You see many people who hurt themselves when a character dies. It's because there is a certain sympathy. There is a certain emotion they feel for these characters. So you see the connection, it connects. Literature is amazing. And the conclusion here is that literary works provide relief, soulagement. La littérature soulage. It provides solidarity. It builds solidarity, helping individuals realize that their struggles are part of a shared human experience. You may have read Jean-Paul Sartre. You may have read La Peste d'Albert Camus, the plague. You see, the plague is a disease. It affected people. And when it affected people, what was the solution? To find a relief. And to find relief, people had to solidarize, to build solidarity, to connect, to fight against it, helping individuals survive and struggle. You may have read books like God's Bits of Wood by Sembène Ousmane, Les Bouts de Bois de Dieu. You see how the railroad workers have struggled, their human condition, les cheminots, la grève des cheminots, how they have collaborated to fight against human injustice because they have a shared human experience. And workers in real society can also read Les Bouts de Bois de Dieu to get inspiration. They will say, camarades, on va faire comme les personnages de Ousmane Sembène dans Le Bout de Bois de Dieu. You hear people saying, like Hamlet said in Shakespeare's Hamlet, because these people connect their life with the life of, characters. That being said, literature is one of the most enduring, profound aspects of human civilization. This is the reason why we think literature is one of the most enduring and profound aspects of civilization. Why? Civilization is culture, and I told you that literature is part of our culture and our tradition. This is the reason why we practice literature. What does literature involve? It involves a range of written and spoken words that captures the essence of human thought, emotion, and imagination. What does this mean? Literature can be written, literature can be oral. Understand that? Yes, there is what we call oral literature. African people were deeply rooted in their oral tradition. Before having a written literature, African literature was oral. We had an oral tradition. If you read La Charte du Kouragan Fouga, if you read Sundiata Keita, you will know how Africa was deeply rooted in its tradition. Today, you are reading writers who did not use to write, like Homer. In philosophy, you read a lot or you learned a lot about Socrates. He did not write. It is his disciples who wrote what he said. So this helps you emerge and know the capture of human thoughts, emotion, and imagination. All right? So feel free to ask questions. So at its core, literature is an art form that utilizes language creatively to express ideas, tell stories, and evoke emotions. So literature, I told you, is an art. And in this art, you have one characteristic, which is beauty, which is aesthetics. So there is a creativity of the writer as an artist. The writer does not speak, but the writer writes. But the poet sings. The writer writes, the poet sings. How they write, how they sing, that's very beautiful. They use language to express their ideas. They use language to tell stories in a very beautiful way and to evoke emotions. So that language is not only a, but that language has a lot of things inside. Images, figures, it has many, many things. And these things characterize the beauty of language. That's why they make a text beautiful. If we say a text is beautiful, it's full of imagery, creativity. It is artistic. You can find melody. You can find music in the text. Do singers attract people? Singers are artists. They are using a literary genre, that is the chant, or they use poetry. Yes, class. This serves as a medium through which individuals and societies explore their values, beliefs, and historical experience. Yes, literature is a medium. La littérature est un moyen d'expression. La littérature est un moyen d'affirmation. Literature is a medium of expression. It helps individuals and society explore their values. You know yourself. All of you have read, or many of you, L'Aventure Ambiguë, or L'Enfant Noir, the Black Child, or So Long a Letter, or God's Beads of Woods, or Karim, the Ousmane Sosé, or Nini la Milatress. They tell about our values, our societies. In Ambiguous Adventure, it tells about our beliefs. Cherno did not want Samba to go to Western school because Cherno said in the Quranic school, what they learn is God. In Western school, what they forget is God. And they learn about mirrors. Historical experiences. You see some works of literature that tell you about the history of one particular community. I will give this example later. You may have read Boubacar Bolis Diop, Murambi. It is a novel that tells about the Rwandan genocide. In 1994, Rwanda was hit by a genocide. And this made millions of people lose their lives. And this memorable story tells about this. Any reader from a Rwandan background who reads this novel may cry. Any Senegalese reader who reads this novel gets into the historical experience of the Hutu and the Tutsi who experienced the genocide. So the definition of literature is broad and dynamic. It means the definition of literature is huge. It's not only 1, 2, or 3, it can be numerous. Dynamic, it means it evolves. Why it evolves? Maybe 100 years ago, that is what literature meant. In the Middle Ages, that is what literature meant. And today, in the digital era, there is what literature means. So it is dynamic. When we say it is dynamic, it means it evolves in time. And c'est un terme, c'est une définition qui évolue dans le temps et dans l'espace, evolving over centuries to accommodate new forms and new modes of expression. So it evolves in time and space to take into consideration what society is, what culture is. I told you today we are in the revolutionary era. in the digital revolution. And writers and storytellers are writing from a different perspective. So traditionally, literature has been categorized into various genres, including fiction, poetry, drama, and nonfiction. I told you that, understand it. Traditionally, literature has been categorized. Literature is categorized into various genres, and these literary genres, you talk about fiction. Give me one example of fiction. Tell me the novel. Ambiguous Adventure, example of novel, say Ambiguous Adventure by Sheikh Hamidou Kane. So Long a Letter by Mariam Abba. Poetry is a genre. Give me an example of poetry, say Les Fleurs du Mal or The Evils of Flowers by Charles Baudelaire. Or you talk about American literature, you say Leaves of Grass by Walt Whitman, the great American poet. Or drama, you tell Shakespeare, Hamlet, or Julius Caesar. Nonfiction is about memoir. You can talk about the Manifesto of the Communist Party by Karl Marx and Frederick Engels. You can talk about Discourse of Colonialism, le discours sur le colonialisme de Césaire. These are essays. It's a very interesting class. And it's very important. All right, let me look at the comments to see if I have questions, but it seems to me that so far so good. And next, each of these genres, they give a unique way of engaging with human experiences in the world around us. What does this mean? Every genre, fiction, drama, poetry, has its own mode of engaging. Chaque genre ou bien catégorie littéraire a ses propres moyens et stratégies de faire agir et d'interagir les lecteurs avec le texte et avec l'auteur. Et dans le contexte de notre expérience humaine et dans notre monde contemporain. For instance, poetry employs rhythm, metaphor to convey profound emotions, while fiction creates imaginary worlds that reflects real-life dilemmas. I told you the example of Victor Hugo, Demain de l'aube, Tomorrow at Dawn. Demain de l'aube, à l'heure où blanchit la campagne, je partirai. Vois-tu, je sais que tu m'attends. You see, going verse per verse, you see the rhythm of the poem. And the rhythm of the poem is linked to the metaphor. Je ne regarderai ni l'or du soir qui tombe. People tell you this is a metaphor, and this metaphor tells about indifference. Ça montre l'indifférence de l'auteur ou bien du poète. It conveys emotion. Ça montre l'indifférence et l'émotion. Le choc que Hugo avait devant la mort de sa fille. Demain de l'aube, à l'heure où blanchit la campagne, je partirai. Vois-tu, je sais que tu m'attends. J'irai par la campagne, j'irai par la montagne. And later he says in French, je ne regarderai ni l'or du soir qui tombe. It's very emotional. This is a metaphor. L'or du soir here means the sun. In the sunset, I would not even look at the sunset. Why? There is indifference. There is emotion, affection. He is affected by the death of Leopoldine. So while fiction creates imaginary worlds that reflects real-time dilemma. Yes, sometimes people use it to solve problems, dilemmas. This is about poetry. All right? Now, what about drama? Drama brings narrative to life through performance. Drama brings narrative. So drama, there is a narrative. There is a text in drama, but that text communicates more physically because the text is supposed, poetry is supposed to be read, drama is supposed to be performed. Avec le théâtre, la différence, c'est que vous avez la mise en scène. You can see the call of the arena, à l'appel des arènes, Aminata Sow Fall. Ou bien le revenant d'Aminata Sow Fall. Now it is applied. This is a novel. But let me take drama. Drama, for example, take Shakespeare, Hamlet, or Othello. You can find it. All right? So this one is kind of burialized. It is fictionalized. It is fictionalized, so you can see how they are represented in their, performance. That's why we call that drama brings the narrative to life through performance. It is supposed to be performed. Read Shakespeare, Romeo and Juliet. If you don't understand Romeo and Juliet, read the movie. You will see it. That's the reason why you see many pieces of literature are adapted to cinema. All right, so there is nonfiction. Nonfiction offers analytical and personal perspective on reality. You see, Karl Marx and Engels wrote the manifesto of the Communist Party. Karl Marx and Frédéric Engels ont écrit le manifeste du Parti communiste. They were talking about social class division, why life is a struggle. So they try to materialize the world in a Marxist perspective, in a philosophical and analytical perspective. It tells about the reality of life. Aimé Césaire, in Negro African literature, wrote about colonialism. He wrote Discours sur le colonialisme. Aimé Césaire was giving his philosophical reflection on what colonialism means to colonial, colonized communities. It's a very important class. Now, when we talk about the functions of literature, all right, I have not seen any questions, but you can continue. Functions of literature, we have number one, aesthetic function. What is the aesthetic function? Aesthetic is beauty, looking for beauty. One of the primary purposes of literature, or in simple words, one of the primary objectives of literature is to provide aesthetic pleasure. It means to find fun with beauty. So through its use of language, the language is used with beauty. You find the beauty in the rhythm, dans le rythme, imagery, les images, les métaphores, in the storytelling techniques, flashbacks, retrospections, analepses, flashbacks, dialogue, monologue. You see characters that dialogue. You see characters that monologue. You see characters that do a soliloquy. You see flashbacks. You see analepses. You see prolepses. It becomes a beauty. Using a style, a specific style. So, literature captivates readers. La littérature attire les lecteurs. Ce n'est pas seulement le texte en tant que matériau, mais aussi la beauté du texte. You learned about le mouvement parnassien, all right? A lot of other things. So, literature immerses people in an imaginative world. So, la littérature amène à voyager. You travel with literature. Imagine you read Alan Edgar Poe, an American poet, or Walt Whitman. You will see a beautiful description of America while you have not been in America. You start dreaming of America, what America is. A European young boy or girls, or a European or an American who has not been to Africa, when he reads or when she reads David Job's Afrique, mon Afrique, Afrique des fiers de guerriers dans la savane ancestrale. They try to know, what is Africa? Oh, Africa has this beautiful history. I love the way he magnifies Africa. I love the way he personifies Africa. And Africa becomes very important from an imaginary fiction. That's the aesthetic beauty, aesthetic function. We look for beauty, imagery, metaphors, techniques, rhyme, beauty. Imagine a writer who starts with rhythm, le rythme, ou bien les vers. How can I say? I have forgotten how we rhyme. When we talk about rhyme, okay? You know that when a poem is rhymed, it's very beautiful. Or when the language is sophisticated, or when the language is romantical, you love it. Or if you want to describe a villain, c'est le vilain. A villain is very harsh, a terrible. It's just like a vampire. They use his crazy language, cranky language. So imagine the poet or the narrator want to show you a very beautiful lady. They will describe this girl in a very beautiful way, in a very sexy way, in a very lovable. You will. Why do you, in your love stories, go in literature and take expressions to send it to your girlfriend or to send it mom? To say, Mama, je t'aime parce que tel. You sometimes quote characters. Vous citez des livres pour exprimer vos sentiments à vos petits amis ou bien vos petites amies, à vos parents pour exprimer votre love, votre amour, parce que aussi la littérature vous nourrit dans cet aspect-là. Because literature has this aesthetic function. So intellectual and cognitive function. Literature stimulates intellectual engagement and encourages critical thinking and analytical skills. It means literature develops intellectual engagement. Yes, you become intellectually engaged, and it encourages critical thinking and analytical thinking skills. That's why you learn Introduction to Literature class. We initiate you to engage with literary texts. Why did Cherno say I don't want to send Samba Diallo to Western school. I want him to stay at the Glowing Heart. Je ne veux pas envoyer Samba à l'école occidentale. Je veux qu'il reste au foyer ardent. I want him to stay in the Glowing Heart. Samba cannot attend Western school. Why? You are invited to interpret this. The most royal lady, La Grande Royale, said to Cherno, of the Jalobe, I think we should send our kids to Western school. Okay? That's what La Grande Royale said. I think we should send our kids to Western school because they will learn the art of joining wood to wood. Ils vont apprendre l'art de convaincre sans avoir raison, ou bien l'art de joindre le bois au bois. That's a very interesting class. Here you start engaging in the philosophical, intellectual engagement and critical thinking. You start analyzing literature. You start questioning literature. You start now developing. Because I learned in Introduction to Literature that this and that, now this is my personal view. I want to interpret ambiguous adventure. I want to study polygamy in Mariam Abbas' So Long a Letter, or in Semben Usman's God's Beads of Wood. I want to see struggle or revolution, La Revolution. Or I want to check, something about, how can I say, Usman Semben's Hala. Another function is moral and ethical function. In moral and ethical section, many literary works explore moral dilemmas, ethics, and human values. They prompt readers to reflect on justice, integrity, personal responsibility, etc. Yes, moral and ethical function. And I have given you examples of classic African novels like Ambiguous Adventure by Cheikh Hamidou Khan, and things in French, Le Monde s'effondre. In terms of moral, I told you about what Cherno said. Cherno said he would not send Samba Diallo to Western school because Western school is denaturalizing, it is alienating. He said he is conservative. He wanted to preserve his religion. Cherno thought that Quranic school is better than the other thing. And he said, when the kids go to Western school, they will forget God. And in Things Fall Apart, you will see Okonkwo who defends the tradition. And Okonkwo was resisting to colonization. He was the symbol of the Igbo tradition. Okonkwo was struggling to keep his society united. And there are so many moral lessons in these books. All right, class? So in other functions, we have social and cultural function. Literature acts as a mirror of society. You learned in French what Stendhal said about la littérature, about the novel, le roman. Le roman est un miroir qu'on traîne le long du chemin. So it means the novel is a reflection of reality. It is a reflection of society. Yes, we can say that. There are so many novels that tell about social life, So Long a Letter, or Hala by Ousmane Sembène, and other things, or Le Revenant, L'Appel des Arènes by Aminata Sofa, La Collégienne of Marouba Fall. They tell about it. So this means that literature preserves historical events, cultural traditions, and social norms. I told you about this beautiful book by Boubacar Boris Diop, who is Senegalese, Murambi, Le Livre des Ossements by Boubacar Boris. This book tells about the genocide in Rwanda, which happened in 1994. You were not born. But this is a book that shows a kind of cultural trauma, a historical trauma. Other books can tell about, they have a cultural function. When they have a cultural function, it means they are celebrating the culture of one community. And they celebrate the culture of that community, so they tell. Take, for example, Harlem Renaissance writers. Claude McKay published works that celebrate Harlem. Senghor wrote a lot about Africa, femme nue, femme noire. Senghor wrote about Joal, Je me rappelle. Read Joal by Senghor. You're gonna see how Senghor connects his culture, okay? And that's what you call la poésie du royaume d'enfance. That's the cultural background of Senghor. And you see so many texts can play this role, and it is important to see this dimension of literature. All right? And the other one, the psychological and emotional function of literature. In this one, literature offers psychological relief and emotional release. So it means literature brings a kind of psychological solution or a relief to your emotions. So you are emotionally shocked, and literature can help you relieve. You read, that's why many people have kind of sympathy is under la compassion. They sympathize. some characters who have existed. Maybe you have been psychologically shocked and you read a book or a piece of literature and this one changes your life. You want to be like this. I was a very, fragile. J'étais un être fragile. Mais quand j'ai lu Sartre, je me suis construit. J'ai essayé de refaire mon être. L'existentialisme est un humanisme. And you read so many other books. You become different. Literature provides comfort. C'est de la consolation. Literature provides companionship. What are you doing, Amadou? No, I cannot sleep. I am reading to have, passion. I'm reading. The book is in companionship. Sometimes people talk about livre de chevet. You read it in times of joy or in times of distress. I am sad. People say, go and do some sports or take a book and read. You cannot sleep and you read. So you cannot sleep, you read, and now you sleep. There is a psychological relief. Maybe you are not happy. You read a book and now you laugh. No. Acteur bi moo dee rek quoi. Personnage bi moo dee. You were angry. Dama meroon sax mais léegi. It happens to you in your life. And it means that what changes you, not a friend, not a girlfriend, not a boyfriend, not your mother, not your father, not your brother, but a book changed you. A book made you laugh. A passage made you have joy. Or a passage made you forget your failure. The exam results are posted, you are shocked. You were crying all day. You read one passage, this makes you strong. You see the point, class? That's where it is. Now, evolution of literature in brief. The development of literature. Here, I will give you a very short evolution and very easy evolution of literature. You don't need to memorize. I told you, class, you don't need to memorize. What I want you is to understand. If I finish here, you can take my lecture, watch it again, watch it again. You can take the videos of the course, watch them again. Class, I repeat, I'm not expecting you to memorize. I'm expecting you to understand. Unfortunately, because of the number, there cannot be any direct interaction. I cannot even see the questions. But what is important is understand. So when you understand, that's the most important thing. All right? That's what I am looking for. And this is very important. Yeah, I'm checking my, how can I say, the comments, but I have not yet seen any comment. Maybe Aminata, if you can help me with some comments or some questions, I take some. Because you cannot speak, you are on YouTube, in the Zoom room. So the evolution of literature in brief. The development of literature is deeply intertwined with the evolution of human civilization. What does this mean? The development or the evolution of literature is linked with the evolution of human civilization. African literature 50 years ago is not the same with African literature today. There is a logic, there is progress, and every step of humanity is related or linked to the reality. African literature started with protest, the negritude movement. You read the negritude movement. But today we are not in the negritude movement. We are in different things. So it evolves, it is intertwined with the evolution of human civilization. That's why you have ancient Greek literature. You have medieval literature, la littérature du Moyen Âge, le classicisme, le siècle des Lumières. These literatures are different from the literatures we have today. Now, from oral traditions to modern digital storytelling, literature has continuously adapted to changing cultural and technological landscapes. What does this mean? It started from oral traditions up to today, digital storytelling. When I talk about digital storytelling, it means literature in the digital era. Now we have storytellers. We have writers or artists who go through the social media or who use technology to entertain the public. Maybe they cannot write, but they talk. They have a privilege that the old bar in the past could not have. So you see, in terms of evolution, many literatures started from the oral tradition. In ancient Greek, la Grèce ancienne, in the generation of Homer, even in African literature, we started with oral literature, myths, legends, and everything. Here, let us talk about the oral tradition. So before the invention of writing, literature was primarily oral, transmitted through spoken words across generations. It means before people were able to write, before literacy, the world started with orality. Orality and literacy. Orality is spoken, literacy written. It means, class, before we got the chance to write, we were already able to speak. We could speak, we had a culture, we had a beautiful folklore, and people used folklore. You could have myths, legends, poems, everything. So ancient cultures preserved myths, legends, and epics and oral storytelling. Even each of you in their society, Jola, Serer, Mandinka, Bainuk, or whatever, you all, maybe when you talk to your parents, they tell you about, the beautiful past. Myths, legends, epics, storytelling. Until my generation, we had the chance to sit around the fireplace and people tell stories. Examples include the Iliad and the Odyssey by the famous Greek poet Homer, in French, the l'Iliade et l'Odyssée. These were passed down in ancient Greece before being recorded in written form. Class understands that Homer is one of the most famous, authors in the world. But Homer was not a writer. Homer was a poet. He did not write. He was just telling and people write after. So he was a great poet. In philosophy, you learned about Socrates. He did not write. It is his disciples who wrote a bit, and then that's how it came. So what does this mean? Oral literature served as a means of education. La littérature orale était un moyen d'éducation. Yes, it was a way to preserve culture, cultural preservation. Our previous societies, our great-great-grandfathers, they could not write, but they had a beautiful culture. They had a beautiful literature, and literature was oral. And there was entertainment. They used folktales, les contes et les légendes. You have read Les Contes d'Amadou Koumba in Sogond. Les Contes d'Amadou Koumba in Sogond tells you about how the African oral tradition was saved, how literature existed before literacy. So in Africa also, the oral tradition has played the same role in the promotion of literature and culture in general. I have given you Les Contes d'Amadou Koumba, Los de Morlam, you have read this. And even in real life, if you go to the village, people use the oral tradition to educate people. It's not because You have not been to a school or to universities that you do not know anything. No, there are many people who are great. We go to the, to the folk culture to see old men who tell us beautiful stories. They are philosophers. In Wolof, they told you about Koch Barma. Did you see any book Koch Barma wrote? They just say Olof Njai Nena or Koch Wahna. Koch was a philosopher. And that is part of our oral tradition. So legends and folktales have been recorded and transmitted from generation to generation. So these myths, legends, they were materialized and recorded. So ancient written literature. When we talk about ancient written literature, you see, with the advent avec l'avènement de l'écriture, ou bien les systèmes d'écriture, with the advent of writing systems, literature took on a more permanent form. So early civilizations such as Egyptians and the Chinese developed written records of myths, religious texts, and philosophical treatises. And we talk about, ancient civilizations, an early one. We talk about Egypt. You learned about ancient Egypt, l'Égypte ancienne, la Grèce ancienne, the Chinese. These cultures, these early civilizations developed written records of myths, religious texts, and philosophical treatises. That's why people talk about the Epic of Gilgamesh. And that one was circa 2100 before Common Era. Here, when you see this C, I help you class, it is circa. All right? Here it means circa. When you see in a text C like this, it means circa. Okay, circa means vers. In history, you learned that El Haj Omar was born circa 1797, vers. In history, when you see this C, it means circa. And this means before Common Era. This means before Common Era. It means simply before Jesus Christ or before Christ. That's what it means, before. One of the earliest literary works explore themes of heroism, friendship, and the search of immortality. Yes, in ancient literatures, you see beautiful topics like heroism, because at the time, it was a time of warriors, c'est le temps des guerriers. And the search of. You have seen today many heroes, many historical figures, the literature of the medieval time, la littérature médiévale. Vous n'entendez parler que des guerriers, l'héroïsme, l'amitié, la loyauté, l'immortalité. These people were looking for honor. Okay? You have read Cid de Corneille, just to give you an idea, if not even in the same epoch. So other examples can be found in different societies. So classical and medieval literature. When we talk about classical and medieval literature, la littérature médiévale, or you call it la littérature du Moyen Âge, the Middle Ages. Here, the biggest reference is Greek and Roman literature. Greek and Roman literature laid the foundation for Western literary traditions, with influential figures like Homer, Sophocles, and Geoffroy Chaucer, shaping poetry, drama, and philosophy. What does this mean? That Western literary traditions, okay, were founded on Greek and Roman literature. So Greek and Roman literature influenced or gave birth to Western literary tradition. Why? Because great writers like Homer, Sophocles, Geoffroy Chaucer, they created or they shaped poetry, drama, and philosophy. These are great writers who marked classical and medieval literature. So during the medieval period, literature was dominated by religious themes. What does this mean? During the medieval time, religion was at the center of life. That's why you saw La Guerre de Religion and everything. Religious was central. And religious themes were seen in Dante's Divine Comedy or Chaucer, Geoffrey Chaucer's The Canterbury Tales. So chivalric romances and epic poems flourished, reflecting the values and struggles of medieval societies. Chivalric, it comes from chevalier, c'est la chevalerie. So romances, if you see in the Middle Ages, they all had horses. Ils montaient tous à cheval. Et c'était des guerriers. C'était les guerriers du Moyen Âge. They were using chivalric romances. Epic poems. In epic poems, read the Iliad and the Odyssey. It flourished. And what do they reflect? They reflect the beauty, the values, and struggles of medieval societies. In medieval societies, you see how these people use this aspect of life to develop a mode of life or literature. And among these themes, you can have bravery, c'est le bravoure. You can have loyalty. You can have protection. And bravery, royalty, protection, you all find them in Homer's, Iliad and the Odyssey. You find them in Shakespeare's drama. You also, one of the weak and worship of women, etc. So what does this mean? All these values were major moral ideals in Middle Ages. So it means in medieval time, all these values were there. All right? So it was a rough and brutal time. And even the knights, c'est les chevaliers, knights, did not always take their virtues seriously. So Renaissance. When now we talk about Renaissance and the Enlightenment, c'est la Renaissance et le siècle des Lumières. Renaissance, Enlightenment literature. Let us start with Renaissance. Renaissance happened between the 14th and 17th centuries. And the Renaissance marked the revival of classical ideals, emphasizing humanism and individualism. What does it mean? Revival, la Renaissance, of classical ideals. It emphasizes on humanity and also on individualism. You can find an example, William Shakespeare. We all are Englishmen, we love Shakespeare. If you take William Shakespeare's plays, you see a great reflection of the Renaissance or the Enlightenment. So you can take Cervantes, those who can read Spanish, Cervantes, Don Quixote. It satirized medieval chivalry. That's about Renaissance. So when we talk about now Enlightenment, le siècle des Lumières, the Enlightenment happened from the 17th to the 18th centuries. So it brought philosophical literature that championed reason and social progress, exemplified in the works of Voltaire and Jean-Jacques Rousseau, and so on. In the Enlightenment class, the Enlightenment means le siècle des Lumières. So here, this literature brought about philosophical literature, and it championed. In philosophical literature, people talk about reason and progress. That's why you see, at the same time, some writers can be in the domain of literature and in the domain of it happened. In Europe, it happened. Look at Jean-Jacques Rousseau. Look at Thomas Hobbes. They all developed interesting things. Indeed, the Renaissance was a period beginning from the late 14th century and lasting until the 17th. So if you try to give just the period, if I ask you, I told you that when I evaluate you, I ask you practical questions. I'm not asking you to memorize, but I'm asking you to follow. So when did the Renaissance happen? Tell me. It lasted from the 14th to the 17th century. And the Age of Enlightenment, important characteristic. The Age of Enlightenment was very interesting. literature during this period was often considered a tool of advancement of knowledge. C'est l'ère de la raison, le siècle des Lumières. People were reasoning. And knowledge, le siècle des savoirs. People were showing scholarly work. So literature during this period was often considered as a tool for the advancement of knowledge. Literature contributed to the promotion of knowledge, to the brilliance. You see brilliant writers, excellent writers, philosophers who theorized, who represented the world in a beautiful way. So during Enlightenment class, writers believed that by closely studying and understanding nature, they could better explain their own thought and beliefs. What does it mean that during Enlightenment, people resorted to nature and they used nature to better explain? Because it is said in French, l'homme c'est le milieu. In nature, you can define man. And they show their thoughts and their beliefs, what they believe the world is, what they believe that we look like, and what they believe nature is. So they saw human nature, how people think and how people behave. You heard about theories of l'état de la nature. People theorize liberty or whatever as something unchanging and constant. They believed that using observation, looking carefully, and reason, thinking logically, they could better understand the world and gain new knowledge. So these writers, be them philosophers or whatever, they used nature as a potential element of life or of the cosmos. And they used reason as a kind of faculty to represent man and to fictionalize the world. And then I move to romanticism and realism. When I start with romanticism, all right, class? Romanticism, the 19th century was shaped by romanticism, which emphasized emotion, nature, and imagination. So you learned it in première, le siècle du mal, le romantisme. People expose, ils extériorisaient leur mal, le moi, emotion, nature, imagination. So poets like Wordsworth, Shelley celebrated the beauty of the natural world and the intensity of human emotion. That's why I told you about le siècle du mal, le siècle du mal. They exposed their interior. So it means that maybe their own experience could be the experience of the public. That's essentially what realism was. No, romanticism, now realism. You are more familiar with realism. Realism, you have reality. Instead of romanticizing the world, fictionality, being very romantic, focusing on romantical, emotional things, writers of realism emerge as a response to romanticism. They focus on ordinary life and social issues, reflecting on social, political, economic matters in society. Here, people started dealing with real life. What is a problem? It was a case of Industrial Revolution or the Civil Wars, American Civil War. Great writers wrote about the American Civil War, like Stephen Crane. Or the Spanish Civil War. Some writers wrote about that. Realism, Honoré de Balzac, okay? Or Émile Zola. Zola wrote something great by, I was saying here, Émile Zola wrote something great about, realism. So writers like Charles Dickens and Émile Zola depicted the struggles of common people, highlighting issues of poverty and injustice. And then we move progressively, class. We move to modern and postmodern literature. Here, you need to be very careful with modern. our generations, maybe you particularly, we are scholars, we know what modern means. But you students, sometimes you think that modern is just in 2 years or 10 years. No, modern in history is larger than that. We are in the 21st century. But what we call modern era, it started more than 100 years ago. So the 20th century witnessed radical changes in literary expression. What does it mean? In the 20th century, there was radical changes in literary expression. So modernist writers, including James Joyce and T.S. Eliot, the English, experience with narrative techniques, a stream of consciousness, writing and fragmented structures. A stream of consciousness means courant de conscience, ou bien flux de conscience in French, courant de conscience. So in the 20th century, what does it mean? It means literature change in bold and creative ways, in a very extraordinary way. Literature change in a very creative way. What happens? A group of writers known as modernists, because the modernists wanted to break away with traditional storytelling. There was a traditional storytelling. And then the modernists wanted to bring something modern, to modernize literature, to bring new things class. And famous modernist writers are James Joyce and T.S. Eliot. What did they do? With stream of consciousness, courant de conscience, they brought new techniques such as a stream of consciousness. What does a stream of consciousness mean, class? Simply tell me this. Writing that mimics the natural flow of thoughts in a person's mind. Writers that mimics means that imitates the natural flow of thoughts. Meaning writing as if your mind was producing, right? It is in your mind. So that's what we call the flux de conscience or courant de conscience. Writing the way it is in your mind. So it's very modern. Not fictionalizing, but representing it the way it comes. So fragmented structures. Stories or poems that did not follow a clear order and have typical beginning, middle, and end. Look at this, class. Stories or poems that did not follow a clear order. So it means there is a kind of fragmentation of structures. Postmodern literature emerged after World War II. After the Second World War, what did it do? It challenged, it means it deviated literary conventions. It defied literary conventions through metafiction, irony, and intertextuality, as seen in the works of Thomas Pynchon and Salman Rushdie. All right? So what does it mean? Intertextuality, what does it mean? Intertextuality means simply the presence of a text in the present text. When you read a text and you find another text that preceded it, that's what we call intertextuality, class. So next, I'm almost done, contemporary and digital literature now. What is contemporary in our epoch and digital? Today, class, literature continues to evolve. It continues. And literature incorporates diverse voices and new technologies. Now, instead of having a simple writer, we can have a combination of different techniques. Now, literature incorporates diverse voices and new technologies. You see now contemporary writers or authors like Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie in Nigeria, or Margaret Atwood or Fatou Diom, etc. They address global issues like migration, gender, climate change, digital literature, including hypertext fiction, and interactive narrative. They redefine storytelling in the digital age. So now with the digital age, things have changed. You see a kind of coming back, revival of oral literature. So storytellers have come back in the form of digital storytellers, and everything is moving. So it is amazing, class. So this is briefly what I wanted to tell you today in the first chapter, to let you know that there is nothing difficult, class. All is a matter of concentration and motivation. I advise you to come regularly to class, follow the lectures with tutorials with the tutors. The tutors will tutor classes for my own classes, only the courses I have designed, like this one. Tomorrow we have American Civilization, tomorrow at 11. I will come and do the same thing to help you understand. So feel free to ask questions. And now that I believe that chapter 1 is okay. So when you finish chapter 1, go to the course again, read the videos and take the knowledge test, what is called test de connaissance. Why do you take test de connaissance? It is no more, considered. Ce n'est plus comptabilisé. Mais c'est un test d'entraînement et d'exercice. Parce que je vous dis, c'est moi qui vous pose les questions à l'examen. Ce sont mes cours. So the questions I ask you are based on the contents. They look like the test. Ça ressemble au test de connaissance. Donc, vous avez intérêt à faire le test de connaissance. Il ne faut pas penser qu'on vous a dit que ce n'est plus comptable, ce n'est plus important. C'est beaucoup plus important. Seulement que la note ne sera pas comptabilisée. Mais quand vous avez un 17, ça vous permet de comprendre, vous avez compris. Si vous avez un 5, vous n'avez pas compris. Si vous avez un 18, c'est très bien. Et les tests, les questions que je pose à l'examen, c'est sous le même format que les tests de connaissance. I hope, class, you understand very well. So, thank you for your attention. Sorry So thank you for your attention. Thank you so very much. Okay, class, I'm done. If you have questions, you can post them in the chat. I can take some questions. You can post now your questions in the chat. All right. I'm done now. You can post your questions in the chat if you want. There is no chat, but you post it on the platform on, how can I say, on, you are on YouTube. So you can post your questions and I can answer some of them. I cannot see the questions, but I wanted to answer some questions. Okay, I can see the live chat now. No, I cannot see any question. There is no live chat. I cannot see. So thank you very much, class. Thank you for coming. I encourage you all. And I wish you good luck. Feel free to send me questions through the platform. I will be happy to answer your questions. Feel free to send me emails. Feel free to download it. I appreciate and I encourage you all, class. I wish you, a successful semester, and tomorrow we will be seeing in American Civilization. And every chapter you finish, I will come and do the same. Thank you so very much, class. Thank you very much. Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you very much. Thank you.